Hi everyone, Sleepy Reader here. In 2012, April 28th, 2012, I posted my first video, which makes today my 5th anniversary, because it is April 28th, 2017. No way did I imagine I would still be here doing this, although I don't know what I imagined. So I put out a call for questions. I wanted to do some Q&A videos. Well, originally I said one Q&A video, but I got about 48 questions from about 23 different friends here on YouTube. So I think it's going to end up being 2 or 3 videos. And I will have a video in which Quacking Duck answers some questions. There were a few questions directed to her, and there might be a few others that might be fun for her to try and answer. Wow, so I'm going to do the questions in order that I received them, and the first one is really hard. The first one comes from the great InfoRead Media, Brian, down in Florida. And he says, here's a quick question for you, bud. What comic book disappointed you most? Wow, I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, my idea was to answer these questions without doing a lot of preparation, just off the top of my head. Maybe one of the most disappointing comic books to me is, what's the number of it? Hulk 121. Whatever the Hulk is with the first appearance of Wolverine. I remember that as being a very disappointing comic book. I did not know at the time that I bought it that it was a major milestone in comic book collecting, and I do not have my copy now. But I seem to remember later in the run of Herb Trimp, the Hulk comics becoming kind of disappointing compared to how they'd been. But that's kind of a cheap answer. I don't know. I've probably had my hopes up for lots of comics and then been a bit disappointed. That's just the nature of the game of reading, I suppose. I used to always be disappointed when I thought there was going to be Jack Kirby art on the inside, and it turned out to be Don Heck. So poor Don Heck was kind of the artist of my disappointment. Don Perlin also used to be an artist of my disappointment. Although probably I got used to expect him. He was on long runs on comics. Okay, well, if I think of any other great comic book disappointments later, I'll let you know, Brian. So then the next person asked me a bunch of questions. Excuse my burping. I'm drinking some soda water. Lime flavored, no calories, gotta slim down. So the next person who sent me a bunch of questions was Eric, also known as Longbox Review. He has a YouTube channel, but he's best known for his podcast called Longbox Review. And I've had the honor of getting to know Eric and being on his podcast a few times. So he asks, what is most different in how you do videos now compared to when you started? I have not changed a whole lot. There was probably a lot of change in the first year. I think I'm much more confident when I go ahead and do it. Sometimes I still screw up majorly, but I used to much more often do multiple takes because I don't do any editing. So if I didn't like what I'd done, I'd just throw it away and try again the next day or something like that. And maybe I've just gotten even sloppier over time and just don't care what I put up. I have added a slightly better microphone. I'm thinking now of getting a webcam, wondering if that will give me a better picture. Right now I'm filming on my iPod, which probably is not giving me great audio. And this, not iPod, sorry, iPad. And this iPad, because this is like the third iPad I've had, this iPad's microphone seems more muffled than others, or maybe it's the case that I have it in is muffling the microphone. I have tried to improve the audio over time. Another thing that's changed is that I've gotten more mellow about letting my videos go long. I used to literally aim for 7-minute videos, and maybe that would be a goal to get back to. But I've gotten very comfortable with long rambles and not worrying about it. I seem to get enough views to keep myself happy. Enough comments is really what it's all about for me, and I seem to have established a pretty good number of comments in most videos. I think I stumbled across, not consciously stumbled into doing things the right way in terms of the social part of YouTube, in terms of commenting a lot on other people's videos, replying to comments quickly, encouraging further conversation with my comments rather than closing down conversation. What change? So next question from Eric is, what changes in the comic book industry from then to now are the most interesting to you? I think the most interesting to me when I started was a few months after Saga had begun. I think 3 months after Saga had begun. And that might have been part of my excitement at that time. So I think to me, Saga was kind of a tipping point for Image Comics and indie comics, and things seemed to get really exciting. And that growth, that power of the indie comics, the power of the creators in the indie comics has been very exciting and interesting to me. And at the same time, digital comics have grown, and I think the power of selling in trades was already pretty well established then, but has become even more established. And so the evolution of the economics of comics is of interest to me, although it wasn't something I thought about a whole lot until I started YouTube and we all started talking about these things, about sales and stuff, and I started looking at websites more in more nitty-gritty fashion rather than a quick perusal of it. And then his next question is related to that. In what directions do you wish the comic book industry would move toward? Well, I may have even said this to you myself, Eric. I think there should be a lot more focus on shorter story arcs, 3 issues, 2 issues, standalone stories. I think that comic book writers, I assume they're the ones to blame, or editors, have gone crazy with stories that really, even 6 issues is just a chapter in an ongoing story. And so each trade is almost like an issue used to be, where it might take 3 trades to finish a story in a lot of cases, or in some cases the entire run of a comic is really just one story. And while occasionally that was really exciting when it was you discover a few comics that were like a 60-issue story, that was really cool. It's not cool all the time, and there's just too much of it. Way back in the day, I remember, being amazed to realize that, say, every 6 or 7 issues of Sandman was a story. They even would have the same title going from, and that seemed like a big deal, that the stories were a trade's worth of comics. But now a trade's worth of comics isn't even a story. So that's where I would like the comic book industry to rein itself in. Other than that, I wish that the big corporations that own Marvel and DC would release them to smaller companies. I think that they've been hurt by that, particularly Marvel. And DC's been owned by a big corporation for a long time, but I think because of Marvel's example, DC wants to be more corporate too, and that hurts comics from the point of view of us readers, anyway. What is your secret origin? Well, I was born on I'm not sure what you mean by secret origin, Eric. Do you mean my secret origin as a YouTuber? My secret origin as a comic book reader? I've talked a lot about my origin as a comic book reader, which was, to put it quickly for people who haven't heard it before, I was at a drugstore. There was a kind of a diner drugstore in some tourist town in Vermont. We were on a summer vacation. It was probably a place where rich people went during the winter to go skiing, and in the summer, not so rich people went just to go hiking and stuff. And I was really bored, and there was this comic book spinner rack. And that was the first time I ever saw a comic book spinner rack. I think I was 9 or 10. And my parents said I could have one for the rest of my life. That was it. Comic books were bad for you, but because it was a vacation, you could pick one. So I remember spinning through that rack for quite a while. I remember specific covers from it with Conan and I think a New Gods or maybe Commandy and the Avengers. And I ended up picking, and Fantastic Four, and I ended up picking the Avengers because it had the most superheroes on the cover. In fact, it had the Fantastic Four on the cover. And it was, as luck would have it, a Neil Adams Avengers, part of the kickoff of the Kree-Skrull War. It was a very intense reading experience for me, and I was hooked. And I spent years after that sneaking and finagling and finding ways to get more comics and slowly breaking down my parents to the point where maybe I got 3 or 4 comics a month, and eventually even more. But I can very vividly remember the first 3 comics I got, because it probably took a whole year to get the next 2 after that one, which I read and read and read, and I copied drawings out of it. I almost sent away One Thin Dime to get a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Charles Atlas or whoever it was. Then Eric's final question, which I take very seriously. So he says, finally, what are your top 5 reasons for despising Travis? And those of you who don't know Eric, Longbox Review, I should mention that he is a very close friend of Travis / Oddfellow Thoughts. I believe they've been friends since high school or maybe earlier. And Travis is very frequently on Eric's podcast. And it's because of Travis that I found out about Eric's podcast. So that's the first reason to despise Travis, that he fooled me into meeting you, Eric. And I got started listening to that podcast, and I felt guilt-ridden that I had to keep listening, and I had to chat with you on Twitter, and then I had to come on to your podcast. So that's the biggest reason to despise Travis. And then he's got that big beard that I'm so jealous of, so I really despise him for that. And he has a sense of rhythm, which I do not have, so I really despise him for that. That's 3 reasons to despise Travis. He gets more comics every month than I do, damn it. But I really despise him for that. Although he probably doesn't get as many back issues as I do. So I feel superior to him on that level. So I need a 5th reason why I despise Travis. He has been to Emerald City Comic Con, and I despise him for that. And I despise you for that, because you've been there too. I have never been to Emerald City Comic Con. Okay, back to the extremely serious questions from 64-page Special, a kind of invisible buddy of mine, because he only does, to my memory, he only does videos where he never shows his face, and they are contest videos or contest entry videos. And I have cruelly been amazed that he hasn't won yet. Or maybe he has won. So anyway, he's a great guy, and he asks, would you say the quality of comics has gone up or down in the last 5 years? I thought it was going way up with the kind of burgeoning of the indie comics. And for a while I thought, well, there was a lot about Marvel Comics I didn't like, but they were also responding to that indie comic craze in interesting ways, like when they did Hawkeye and Squirrel Girl and such like that. So I felt like in general it was moving in a good direction, but I felt, because I'm a cheap bastard, I felt the pricing was going up too quickly and in too large of increments. I feel like the indie thing has flattened out. Marvel and DC are both struggling and answering the question of how to survive in ways that aren't ideal for me as a reader. They're not. Look, I kind of like DC's Rebirth, but still, in the long run, it doesn't feel like a total, most high quality direction I would want it to go in. So anyway, I would say in the 5 years it went up and then it's kind of plateaued, with a worry that it might go down. Particularly, I think if less people can make money doing their indie comics, then there'll be less of a push to do quality indie comics. And the indie comics will just be more of a quirky niche again, rather than the place where the best comics are published. Okay, and then he asks, and I will have Quacking Duck answer this. Will Quacking Duck receive her own spin-off? So we'll hold that question off till later. And then he asks, what's with all the tops? You and Magical Matt, nothing but tops. He wants us to take our clothes off on our videos. And I believe if you search far enough back, you can find a video where Matt was topless, I think in his much younger days, unless he's taken that down. And all of my topless videos are at a secret link, which I'll put down below. You may need special glasses to find that link. Okay, I'm going to stop here because the next question is from the awesome Rick and Dave Comic Book Hour, and I just realized I need something. I need to get something to show you guys to answer their question, which is more of a request than a question, but I'm including it in this Q&A. Okay, back in a little bit.